Um, Hi, my name is Julie Zebrak. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of you for your service and to share how sorry we are for all the attacks on the federal workforce that many of you have been experiencing. We're here this afternoon to say that we know what a tremendous public service you have given our fellow Americans and our country, and we owe you a debt of gratitude for that. And we're here today to make sure that we can provide you all with the tools that we can share to make this time of uncertainty a little bit smoother. So, anyways, thank you all for being here. I'm going to start by asking our panelists to go around to briefly introduce yourselves and to tell everybody briefly how your organizations are helping folks navigate their career transitions and job searches. And then once our three panelists share, I will share a little bit about my background. So Lauren, would you mind kicking it off for us?
Happy to, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Baer. I'm the managing partner of Arena. I am a former congressional candidate, but before all of that, I spent 6 years as an official in the State Department. So I understand personally how challenging it can be to make the transition from a federal job to other work. Even under the best of circumstances. And we all know we are not dealing with the best of circumstances at the moment. Part of what drew me to working at Arena is that we help folks in moments of career transition, particularly those who want to work in politics. So at Arena, we build the teams that power democratic victories. And we do that primarily in three ways, which I'm going to dig into a little bit later, but I'll give you just a brief overview here. The first thing we do is we train folks to work on campaigns and in movement organizations. The second thing we do is that we help them get jobs and advance in their careers. And this includes our Arena Careers Jobs Board, where you'll find thousands of jobs in politics, our daily Jobs Digest email list, our active job seeker database, where you can upload your resume and make clear to hiring managers around the country that you're open to work, our skill building sessions like resume review and interview workshop, jobs fairs, and networking events. And the third thing we do is we provide tools to help you along the way at every stage of your career. So I'm really glad to be here with so many of you today and looking forward to working with this great panel to help provide some tools and tips that you can use in your job search.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks again for leading Arena and helping us get this event off the ground. Tom, would you mind going next and sharing your expertise?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Serena, for putting this on. My name is Tom Manatos. I run Tom Manatos Jobs. It is named Tom Manatos Jobs not because I'm an egomaniac, but because when I was on Capitol Hill, I found myself in a privileged situation, and I was on a lot of internal email lists. And this is at a time before LinkedIn and before Twitter and Facebook and any other ways people found out about jobs. And I would just cut and paste those job postings that I saw and hit send on my Hotmail email at the end of the day. And it became a thing known to get on Tom Manatos's email list. After 9 years in Congress, when I switched to the political world to go work for the DNC, my wife and I created a website and then made it like nonpartisan, bipartisan. So what our jobs board seeks to do is get every policy, government relations, government, local, state, federal job out there in the ether, just to let people know that they're out there and that we're going to be talking about today. And what I do a lot of my hobby and my career is helping people network. Knowing about the job is really about 25% of it. The other 75% is networking your way to the job. And in instances like we're in today, and a lot of you have been in your career for a long time and maybe haven't freshened that resume up or haven't had a job search in a while, hopefully we can help you, provide you that. But in terms of our job postings, we have a free daily email that goes out in the morning, each morning, that you can be subscribed to for free just to keep an eye on the jobs. And then if you want to read the full description of one of those, it's $5 a month and discounted for the more of the time that you subscribe. But that's the model that we've built based off that model that we had on Capitol Hill. We're sending just Capitol Hill jobs out. But Julie and Arena, thanks again for putting this incredibly valuable panel together at such a critical time for so many people.
Thanks, Tom. Caitlin, can we hear from you? I'm actually excited to learn. I'm familiar with Arena and with Tom Manatos Jobs. I'm least familiar with Civic Match and the work you're doing, Caitlin. So I can't wait to hear more.
Yes. Hi, Julie. Hi, everyone. Thank you to the Arena team. You guys put together incredible events weekly, daily, and have been such a supportive network for folks looking for what's next. So great to be here. Hi to everyone. My name is Caitlin Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Work for America. We help make public service a more desirable, accessible, stable career path with the goal of uplifting families and strengthening communities. And we primarily focus on helping state and local governments really improve their ability to recruit and retain talent. But we, post-November, post-election, launched a program called Civic Match that is helping to connect outgoing federal workers and folks coming off of 2024 campaigns directly with jobs in state and local governments. So we launched the program as a Google form in November, thinking we might run it for a couple of months and help place political appointees and campaign staff who had wanted to work in government, but were going to be out of a job. And we have, as you all know firsthand, seen an incredible volume of need as we have entered the new administration and seen folks being laid off across the federal government. Today, we are supporting over 8,000 job seekers in finding what's next. Many of you on this call are already in Civic Match, but if you're not, we are here to support you to the extent you're interested in staying in public service at the state and local level. We're a two-sided talent matching platform, so we're working directly with 190 different state and local governments. And all of the jobs on our public jobs board are connected to a real hiring manager. So we have been very lucky to partner with the Arena team to put on a series of live events. We have more coming up and we'll make sure that those are shared out, but very excited to be here. I started my career at USDA in the federal government and then transitioned to local government in New York City. So I am excited to support folks in this moment of transition, but also always happy to talk kind of firsthand about transitioning from the federal to the local level. So thanks again.
Thanks, Caitlin. So I'm sorry if you guys can hear in my background that somebody's cutting the grass right now, of course, right as we're kicking this off. So I'm Julie Zebrak. I'm located in Bethesda, Maryland. I spent 19 years in the federal government, mostly as a lawyer at the Department of Justice and then briefly at Treasury at FinCEN. In 2016, I left the government and I transitioned into a career of politics and advocacy and have been doing that work ever since. On top of that, as a side hustle, I started coaching young adults who are coming from all over the country, looking for jobs in Washington in the government and social impact policy and the Washington nonprofit world. I've been doing that for a couple of years. Of course, now I am not urging them to go to the federal government, but I'm still helping college and law school recent grads who are looking for these, looking to find their early career roles in public service and social impact jobs. And I had reached out to both Lauren and Tom about today because I use their resources all the time with the students or young adults that I work with. And I know what a tremendous resource they provide. And I know they're doing all this work independently to help folks coming out of the federal government, but I wanted to make sure that we kind of pulled together everybody. So I'm grateful that y'all are here. I'm grateful to know more about Caitlin and Civic Match, and I'm excited to bring all of this to all of you in the audience. We are so excited to have you here, not because this is a moment that any of us anticipated being as rough as it is, but we're so glad that you found us and that we can provide some services. So we know that the folks on this call listening in, calling in, have a wide range of talents from scientists to lawyers to foreign aid to FDA work. We want to make sure that we're helping you think through how to translate some of those skills into the next area that you're going to be working. And so I'm going to call upon each of our panelists now to share your sense of how to translate some of these federal government skills into other sectors, whether it's the private sector, into politics, policy, political campaigns, into state or local government, or into nonprofits. So to kick that off, how to translate those skills, Tom, I'm going to jump right to you and get your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I think the word you use there is key, translate. So whether you're moving to New York City or LA, or going from the federal government job to a state government or the private sector, you need to find a translator, someone who knows where you're coming from. So say it's USAID or the Department of Justice. Go find someone from one of those agencies in the area you want to work in, and learn from them of how they translated the skills that you have in one of those agencies to that area of the workforce, that particular organization. So I'll give you an example. I had somebody who worked on Capitol Hill who they wanted to move to New York City because their partner was up there. And so we found a couple of former Capitol Hill people up there and said, oh, they were a legislative assistant on Capitol Hill. Here's how those skill sets translate to a corporate job at a bank, or to the Clinton Foundation, or to whatever else, whether that's like tangentially associated with policy or politics or not whatsoever. And those translators are often able to help you update your resume, communicate in a different way in an interview of the skill set that you're bringing to that job. And that applicable in the sense of here, if we're talking about translating from the federal government to a public affairs job or a government relations job and still staying in DC, or a nonprofit job. Finding those translators helps you begin to wrap your mind around the way that you're selling yourself, because that's what this is, for those jobs that you're applying for. And for people that you find that are those translators, really give them try to give them an idea of what direction you want to go. The thing that frustrates me is when I've been talking to people, not only in this instance, but in past, of like, I just don't know what I want to do. I'm not sure where to go. That doesn't enable me to help you. Even if it's like a broad area, like I want to work for the nonprofit sector, or I want to go work in the private sector, I can at least connect you, that individual, with people in those general broad areas, or a very specific organization with people that are maybe have a similar background as you, so they can help you with that translator step.
That's great. Caitlin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, so I'll speak a little bit to translating your federal skills to the state and local government level, because that's what we spend our time thinking about. And Civic Match does have some resources on our website on translating your skills, both for former campaign staff and for former federal workers. So encourage you to check those out. But some of the highlights, many of you have skills and expertise from your time in the federal government that is desperately needed on the state and local level. So some of the things that immediately come to mind: if you have program management experience, if you have contract experience, grant management experience, procurement experience, these are things that state and local governments are desperate for. I literally had a hiring manager on one of our events say, if anyone here has procurement experience, I will fly to you, bring you to our state, and hire you tomorrow. So you have skills that state and local governments desperately want. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about roles at the state and local level. Furthermore, for those of you who are working on large federal funding programs that have ended up sending money to state and local governments, for example, CHIPS Act, IRA-funded programs, tech hubs. Right now, cities and states are in implementation mode on so many of these programs, and you all are the experts. You helped write them, you helped launch them. There is no one better suited to help actually be boots on the ground implementing this work at the state and local level. And so highly recommend for those who are working on programs that funded local projects to just think about the fact that they really need the expertise you have and the expertise that, quite frankly, may be lost in all of the transition and change that's occurring at the federal level. The last thing I'll say is really hone in on and think about your why you do this work, why you want the job you're applying for. At the end of the day, hiring managers are people. They respond well to plain English. They respond well to personal narrative. They want to know that you're actually excited about the work and the job that you're applying for. So do not lose your sense of self and your own sort of story and personal narrative, and really tell some of your stories in a way that kind of connects the dots from what you've done at the federal level, what you've done throughout your career, to the role that you're applying for. It's really important that you show up to hiring managers as someone who really wants the job and is not just putting in a lot of job applications. And I know the reality is that many of you are probably applying for a lot of different things, but for each application, take a moment to really think about what is it about this role that I'm uniquely suited for based on my experience and that I'm really excited about, and just share that directly in your application, in your cover letter, etc.
That's great. That's really, I mean, I think like hearing that, it's inspiring to know that there are, those kinds of opportunities out there. And I hope folks will take some heart from that and send that message out to their friends in procurement and other areas, which are so government focused. So thanks, Caitlin. Lauren, can we hear from you on this?
Sure. And I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about some translation skills that are going to be relevant, whatever kind of job that you're going to be applying for. And so I know that many of you on this call have been working for the federal government for a long time, and it might be for the entirety of your career. But just because the federal government is all you know, or something that you know very well, I think it's important to remember that it's foreign to most non-governmental employers, which means your job is to demystify what you've done and demonstrate how you have broadly applicable skills to a range of jobs. So just a handful of tips. The first thing I would say is on your resume, and then when talking about your work, frame your work in terms not of your responsibilities, but in terms of your accomplishments. When people are hiring, they want to know that someone's had an impact in their previous roles, that they've been able to affect change. So this is the time to think about quantifying as much as possible what you've done in your roles, whether that's in terms of numbers of dollars or numbers of programs managed, numbers of people affected. But again, think not just about what you oversaw, but how you had impact through the roles that you had. The second thing I would say is really pull out and highlight your core skills and competencies. Think about what it is that underlies the work that you did in your job, whether that's program management, whether that's strategic planning and execution, whether that's communications. And it might even be smart to do this in a separate section of your resume that highlights really briefly in bullets at the top your core skills and competencies, or in a brief summary describing who you are and the type of role that you'd be good in. And the final thing, which is very federal government specific, don't use acronyms. I remember when I joined the federal government, I carried around a little notebook and I spent like my first 3 months on the job just writing down sequences of letters I heard so that I could look them up later and find out what people were talking about. This is going to be the experience of anyone who hasn't worked in the federal government in talking with you. So your job is to spell things out in plain language for them so that they understand what kind of bureau you were working in, what kind of program you were overseeing. I think it's fine also to use shortcut plain language terms instead of official government names of things so that people understand in real terms and can relate to what you were doing. So those are just a handful of tips in terms of making your work relatable to people in any field.
Thanks, Lauren. Those are great. And a couple of things that y'all mentioned sort of reminded me of a couple of things I've seen. One is that definitely don't I think it was Lauren who mentioned this, but talk about your accomplishments. Don't take your position descriptions and dump in those tasks that are in your position descriptions, because those will not translate. You've got to rewrite them. And to the point of rewriting, a couple thoughts. One is, if any of you have ever had to do ECQs for your SES applications, or gone through that process, that's a good way. In that process, you've had to quantify your accomplishments. And so I would go back, if you've ever done an application with your ECQs, and remind yourself of how you phrased it, because that might inform how you think about this ahead of interviews, or how you might pull information for your resume itself. And then the other thing I would just say that I was reminded of is, if it's hard for you to translate, harder for you to think about how to translate what you're doing to another sector, besides what Tom suggested, which is like meeting with people, reaching out to people you used to work with, I would recommend looking at people's LinkedIn, who you used to work with, and see how they described it on LinkedIn. And if you find a good description, I think you can mirror some of what you're doing from that. And if it's someone you know that you feel comfortable asking, you could ask them, can you share the part of your resume that describes the work you did, just so I have some ideas. I think especially, federal workers and former federal workers are very keen to be helpful to each other right now. And I think people would be happy to, cut and paste from their resume some language that they worked on that was successful for them, and have you guys use it. So those are just a couple other thoughts that jump to mind. So one thing that we all hear a lot about now is AI, and how we use AI in our job search process. Do you guys, and I'm going to start with you, Tom, on this. Do you have any advice for how using AI can actually help you apply for jobs, make changes to your resume, or help you prepare for interviews?
Sure. I think the best way is just the pure writing skills. I myself am not a strong writer, and the use of ChatGPT is unbelievable, where I can put a couple sentences that I would have written in a ChatGPT, and it makes it much smoother. So from the perspective of just basic writing and descriptions, of course, you're double and triple checking everything it spits back out to you to make sure it's completely accurate. But smoothing of the writing is a great way to use it. And then just basic research about a company, and obviously ask it first of the citations it's using. But I've found it's incredibly useful to research what the type of organization you're dealing with and the type of work that they do. I found it better than Google in that respect, in terms of the researching side of it. And one thing that I will mention, that I don't believe this is the case in a lot of the jobs in the policy world just yet. AI is being used by HR departments as an initial screen. So I give the example of somebody I know that in sales was applying for months, and he's in his 50s, his whole career in sales, that was unable to get a single callback. It was because he wasn't using the right terminology that the AI bots on the HR side were looking for in the jobs he was applying to. So once he finally talked to somebody that gave him the tips of the key phrases and words being used in his application, his resume, and his cover letter, then he got past those AI bots to an actual HR human that was able to then sell himself for those jobs. And he got a job within a month and had 3 interviews even within the first month after figuring that out. So just something to be aware of on both AI using for yourself, but then
What
also
are your
the
thoughts
challenges
about that?
of crossing the AI bots on the private sector.
So that raises a great point, Tom. Do you know, like, what's a good way to figure that out? Like, I often, when I'm working with young adults, I urge them to really look closely at the job description. The vacancy announcement, and mirror some of the phrases back that they've done, if they've done those things. Are there other I mean, how did that guy, do you know? Like,
Yeah, that's actually exactly what was suggested, is that you want to, and this is with or without AI, you need to be using the exact terminology that's in the job description with what you've done. Now, to your point, Julie, not over exaggerating it, but applying those same skills that they're looking for in your resume and in your cover letter. In fact, when I apply, I put the job description on one part of my screen and my resume on the other, and I'm literally using the same phrases or just triple checking what they're looking for, and the fact that I'm applying the same type of skill set that they're looking for in my resume, describing what I've done in the past or in my cover letter. And I think that's both, we'll cross those AI bots and then just get the attention correctly with the hiring manager, regardless of AI or not.
okay, good. Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad that's what I've been telling people I work with. So I'm glad you're confirming that. Caitlin and Lauren, do either of you have you worked with AI on the applying end or on the reviewing end? Do you have insights for us?
Yeah, I think in general, I think about AI as something that can help remove some of the drudgery of a job search. And so I always think about how do you incorporate it at every step of the process. So the first would be what Tom talked about is asking AI to revise your resume based on a particular job description, how to think about updating those bullet points that you've got there. But you can also ask it to do a first draft of a cover letter. You could ask AI to draft an email from a friend who works at the company you're applying to refer you for the job based on your skills and the job description. You could ask AI to summarize key market trends or developments related to a company or organization you're interested in working at. At the interview stage, I think it can be really, really helpful to draft sample interview questions and then also potentially sample answers or bullet points based on the work that you've done. And then I just want to double down on what Tom said is that you should always, always, always check the work of anything that has been AI generated. This is getting very, very good, but you will still find inaccuracies pop up, and you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward in the process.
I completely agree with what's been said, and would just add a couple of things, which is to Lauren's points, use AI to improve and enhance your work, not to replace it, and be very cognizant of just putting in a prompt and then copying and pasting what you get from AI, not just from an accuracy perspective, but I see cover letters all the time that clearly are formatted exactly as they were copy and pasted from AI. Do this slight extra bit of work it takes to just make sure that your cover letter looks like you wrote it, even if you had some help. And don't be afraid to get help from AI. I usually recommend that folks actually write their first draft of a cover letter and then use AI to suggest ways to enhance it, to edit it, to go through for spelling and grammar. In addition to putting in job descriptions to help you enhance cover letters to be specific to that job, I actually recommend just dumping in a bunch of your original writing to a chat GPT thread and say, hey, please read this. This is written in my voice. I'm going to ask you to help with a cover letter and want to make sure that you're writing as me. And so I strongly recommend training it, working with it, getting comfortable with ChatGPT before you're using it for an external facing thing, and use it to get more specific and to have more clarity on why the roles you are applying for are a great fit for you. To what I was saying before about kind of telling your story, just take a day to jot down a bunch of stories of your career and accomplishments and things that you've done and meaningful moments in your career journey, and dump that into a chat GPT thread so that it's just there and it knows what things you want to be able to hit on as you're drafting cover letters. Can't emphasize enough. Train it to be like you in writing. It will get better and better. I use it for everything, and it basically can draft stuff in my voice at this point because of the kind of practice and going back and forth.
That's amazing, and an extra layer of advice that I think is really important, and that is certainly very new for people who have perhaps been in the government for 20 years or 5 years, to think about and to get more comfortable with. And that's where, I mean, I have young adult kids. That's where you get your kids, your grandkids, whoever can help you, your next door neighbor, to get you a little more comfortable with using something like GPT and AI, and figuring out what Caitlin is suggesting, which is how to have it internalize your voice. But I think that all of this is amazing advice and a real wrinkle compared to, prior ways we all looked for jobs. And so I want to make sure that we, make note of that and think about that in terms of both preparing and then also, thinking about how employers are looking at us. And look, I mean, as you're learning how to do this, this is what I tell my students: stick it on your resume. If you learn how to use Chat GPT, that's another skill you have. All right, so we've sort of covered some of this, but I want to, have us think through as a group how the job market has shifted rapidly over the last few months, and how we should think about those changes in conducting our job searches. And so obviously AI is a part of it, but I think, there are other differences that we're all seeing in the last few months, and again, thinking about some of you who have been in the government for the last, decade or two, like how to think about this new landscape as of, mid-April 2025. So, Lauren, can you give us some of your thoughts about what changes you've seen in searching for a job, and how, besides AI, how you can give some guidance?
Sure. And to start, I'll just state the obvious. The market has been flooded with talent in the past couple of months. A couple of years ago in 2022, I was responding to interview requests about how hard it was for employers to find talent in politics and in movement organizations. And we're seeing the exact opposite here, where there are tens of thousands of highly qualified people looking for work. And what we're hearing from hiring managers is oftentimes they're posting a job and they're getting not dozens, but hundreds or even sometimes over 1,000 applications in the first 24 hours. And so I think this really changes how you should think about your search in two ways. The first one is to act quickly. People are not leaving postings open for as long as they used to because they're just getting so much incoming. So you need to be in a posture that you're ready to quickly adapt your application materials and apply if you see something that's interesting to you. And the second thing I would say is I think in this context, and this picks up on something Tom said earlier, your network matters more than ever in terms of helping you stand out from the crowd. I've talked to hiring managers who are just like so overwhelmed that they don't have the internal capacity to screen as many applicants as they're getting. And so people are falling back on a lot of the things we've tried to move away from, which is interviewing or pulling out from the pile people who they know through something or who've been referred to them. So make sure when you're looking for a job that you're doing that work, that you're finding out who you might know directly, who works for that company, even second or third degree contacts that you can leverage, because your goal really is to get pulled out of that big pile at the first stage to then have the opportunity to show who you are and allow yourself to shine. And that's really the biggest change I've seen in 2025.
Thank you. Tom?
Totally agree. Lauren said with the market flooded, you need to figure out ways to differentiate yourself. And I think what is happening now everywhere is what happens on Capitol Hill for years, is that chief of staff posts a staff assistant or a legislative correspondent opening, and they literally have hundreds of resumes within the first 24 hours. So what we always advise people is like, think of just literally an actual pile on their desk, and how do you get your resume on top? It's being recommended by somebody that hiring manager knows, someone in the office knows, or the boss knows. And you just need to think about it as a way, your goal is to have multiple people ping that office with your resume. So how do you go about doing that? And that's what we share in the 11 networking tips article that we shared earlier, is you're networking your tail off to find everyone and anyone that you know that knows that organization, but you need to build up that network over time. And this is what your day-to-day you should be doing. I'd rather you be splitting your time with, of course, applying to jobs, but also doing as many networking coffees and lunches and Zoom calls and phone calls that you can do, so that you have a literal spreadsheet of people that you've met with for even 15-minute calls, conversations that you can then look up with your links to their LinkedIn, the notes from the conversations you've had, that, oh, that Lauren might know someone at the ACLU, or Julie might know somebody at this environmental organization, based off your spreadsheet of your notes, that when you apply, that you go open and you find out who can ping your resume. Because you just need to put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes yourself. When you're overwhelmed with hundreds, or as Lauren said, thousands of resumes, who are you going to rely upon? What's your shortcut to fill that job with someone that you know is going to be good? You're going to take a recommendation from a friend, from a former colleague, from someone of a position of power that recommends somebody. Then you're going to use your own skills to interview them. But what you're looking to do is just get your resume in that inbox. And another piece of advice we give in that article is, at the end of every one of those conversations you do, in order to build out that spreadsheet, send a thank you email with your resume attached. I can't tell you how many times people have gotten jobs by a lazy manager, didn't want the hundreds of thousands of resumes and the bother of all that. And they go to their friends, they go to their colleagues, their congressional delegation, even they're in their office, to say, hey, I don't want 100 resumes if I post a job at Tom Manatos Jobs. Do you know anyone looking? Like, oh yeah, I just had coffee with this bright young woman that recently lost her job from the federal government. I'll send you her resume. And that job was never posted anywhere. No one knew about it, but inside the office, yet that person got that interview because they did the simple act of networking and then attaching their resume to the thank you note. And then lastly, sorry, one thing I left out was that at the end of every one of those conversations, in order to continue to grow your network, you always say, thank you so much for your advice. I really appreciate it. Is there somebody else that you suggest I get in touch with? So you continue to grow it every step of the way. And then in that thank you email with your resume attached, you're reminding them of that connection they promised you. And then by attaching that resume, it just helps them to kind of forward it to say, hey, got coffee with this young man. Would you mind getting 15 minutes with them as they navigate their job search? But that really is the key, is that your ultimate goal is to have multiple people recommending you to overcome that.
Yeah.
Everybody else go.
Those are all amazing tips. And I particularly like the one about sending when you send a thank you note, for somebody taking the time to then to also attach your resume for them in case they are going to move it forward. I would add to Tom's point a bit of nuance, which is that if I would be careful about asking people who really don't know anything about you personally or your work ethic. They may be able to pass your resume forward, but they may not be able to vouch for you. And if you can find people who can vouch for the actual work you've done or your character, those are even better. So I had somebody reach out to me who, I've worked with tangentially, because she saw through LinkedIn that I know someone that she wanted to connect with. I happen to know that her former boss also knows that person. And I said, if you think your former boss will vouch for you, I think she should reach out. Not that I'm not willing to, but she can say, you've got to talk to this person. She did amazing work. Whereas I can only say, hi, she seems great. I'm passing along her resume. So to the extent you have people who can vouch for you, whether it's your work or a partner, an external partner that you've worked with outside of the government, just having a little bit more of that, their ability to say how great you are and back it up, I think is really a great thing to do in terms of getting your resume looked at. So thank you, Tom. Caitlin?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to the great points made is that looking for a job is just sales 101. You're selling yourself to the hiring managers, and especially for folks who have dedicated their careers to public service. We all do the work expecting zero praise. And in fact, people are probably upset about everything you've ever worked on because that's just the nature of being in public service. And so it's not natural to lead from a place of, I am so awesome, this is what I've accomplished. But that is ultimately what you have to be comfortable doing, especially in an environment where the market is flooded and you need to stand out. And I think there's a couple of ways to do that, especially when putting your resume in without a connection to help bump your name to the top of the pile. There's kind of three things I would say. One, think about how you can solve a problem that the hiring manager has. So say something really specific when you reach out to them. And I do, we have hired for a lot of jobs recently. We've gotten hundreds of resumes for those jobs. I do get outreach from half of the candidates, it feels like, on LinkedIn. And that can be a really good thing, or it can hurt your application depending on how you do it. So I get folks who reach out and say, hey, I saw you're hiring for a communications coordinator. When I was at this federal agency, I was able to solve this communications challenge, and I think it would be really helpful in what you're dealing with. I've seen you do XYZ. Here's how I could help. So say something really specific about how you could solve the challenges that that role is going to be responsible for. Or offer to help the hiring manager. We get people who reach out all the time saying, hey, just wanted to send a note saying that I applied for the job that you had posted and wanted to let you know that I was riffed from my agency and I would love to share information about Civic Match or your work with folks at my agency to help drive more applications to your program. So think about if there are small ways where you could actually provide immediate help and really show value as someone who we want on the team. We have had at this point 2 folks who reached out to volunteer with Work for America who we've now hired because they were such valuable volunteers. They are in the process of looking for a job. They had the time and flexibility to do it, and we couldn't live without them after we had the chance to work with them. So if you're in a position to do that, consider what you could kind of offer to show your value when going through the interview process. And then this has been touched on, but it's sometimes hard to get your connections to make an introduction for you. Don't hesitate to reach out and say, hey, Caitlin, I saw that you're connected to Lauren. I know her too, and would love to talk to you about this thing. I'm then going to just send a quick text to Lauren and say, hey, do you know this person? And if she validates, then yeah, I'm going to have a conversation with you. But just keep in mind for hiring managers, we've hired for 3 jobs recently. I get dozens of LinkedIn messages a day, and I cannot set up an informational interview with everyone, but I do with some folks when they can really show that they really care about what our organization is doing, they can help with the challenges that we're addressing, and they really care about our mission such that it's worth me developing a relationship with that person, even if we don't have an immediate opportunity for them.
That's also great advice and a great way to think about using LinkedIn, which is, we've touched on this some with all of you about using your professional network and making sure that you're leveraging that. And even if you feel like, gosh, I haven't really, leaned into reaching out to people in so many years, I've been at this job for 10 years. I don't really know who my network is, like how, that's right there is trying to figure that out is an exercise for sure. Do you all have advice? And Lauren, I'm going to start with you on how to re-tap into your network or otherwise create a network if this is your first time having to do a big job search again?
Sure, Julie. Networking is hugely important. And I'm going to borrow some advice here from my former career coach, Michael Melcher, who said you really need to leverage the power of weak ties, especially if you are transitioning jobs, transitioning sectors, doing something new after a long time of doing the same thing. And what Michael meant by that is that the people who are closest to you, who know you best, tend to think of you in a particular way. So your other colleagues from working you in government might think of you just as someone who works on procurement or program management or policy development in a particular area. But if you're talking to a weaker tie in your network, someone who's a second or a third degree connection, they're able to kind of zoom out and take a more holistic, bigger picture view of you, understand your skills and how they might be applicable to a different sector, a different industry, a different type of work. And so I really think you need to conceive of your network broadly. So the first ways that you can do this is reach out to those weaker ties who are doing things that you might be interested in doing. If you don't have a direct connection, ask that intermediary who you know to make an introduction on an informational basis to learn more about what they're doing. And then do exactly what Tom said. And when you talk to those people, ask them to introduce you to 2 or 3 more people who might be able to help. This is going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself in a completely fresh and new way to people who are going to help you in that next kind of reinvention stage of your career. So that's my first tip on networking, and I will actually drop a link in the chat right now to Michael's book. I promise I'm not getting a kickback here. He's just really smart, and it's a great read. And the second thing is just keep your networks fresh when you don't have an ask. I've found that I kind of have 2 sorts of mentees in my life. Those who touch base just to say hi occasionally, see how I'm doing, how my kids are doing, share an article they think I might be interested in, and those who show up only in my inbox, specifically when they have an ask. You are always more inclined to help the person who's built up a relationship with you that's not purely transactional. Now, I know that can be hard to do at a moment when you're like, oh my God, but I just lost my job and I need everything to be pretty transactional right now. But you should think about this going forward. And it can be simple tasks, just like putting people on your annual holiday card list, or just when you think of something, which we all think of people in our day to day lives, text someone, drop them an email, say hello. It really does make folks more receptive to helping out in those times of need.
Thanks, Lauren. Let's see, Tom, do you have any other thoughts to add that you forgot from your networking 101?
Yeah, just so kind of like, especially for those that don't already have that network, and perhaps have tapped out, the former folks that used to work at your agency, just ask what makes you you, because someone who shares any kind of commonality is just a little bit more likely to help you out. So I'm talking about hometown, home state, university. I don't care if you went to University of Maryland and you want to reach out to somebody that works at organization you want to work at, and they went to law school. It doesn't matter. You're both Terps. Ethnicity, religion, fraternity, sorority, literally any common connection helps with that. So when I was unemployed after an election, I found every Greek American in politics and in policy. I found everyone that I used to work with on Capitol Hill. I found everyone that went to the 2 institutions I went to for undergrad and my master's. And I said, hey, we share this commonality. Would you have 15 minutes to chat with me? I'd love to learn about your career and kind of tips that you've had to get to where you want to be. Because in this world, in this political and policy world, it's a very, very pay it forward mentality. And you just have to have the confidence that every single person you're reaching out to was in your shoes at one point. And they're probably pretty likely to say yes, especially if you share that common bond that you can prey upon. And that even again, when you ask for that next 1, 2, or as Julie or Lauren suggested, 3 people to reach out to afterwards, they might put you with someone that went to the same organization or same school that you went to, or maybe they put you in touch with from the same hometown. But perhaps it's someone that you talked about, you want to work for an environmental organization, and their best friend might work at LCV, and they put you in touch with them. So it's just that initial one where if you share that common bond, that makes them a little bit more likely to help you down the road.
Really smart advice. Caitlin, anything to add to that before we move on to Q&As?
Sure. One thing I will note when it comes to thinking more broadly about your network, I got really great advice early in my career from a boss who said, mentors are great, but eventually you're going to go through your career and your mentors are going to exit the workforce, and you're going to look around and your peers are the only folks left. And so I would say, do not forget about your peers and your colleagues. There is so much collective wisdom on this call right now. And I think one of the things that's gotten lost in the sort of numbers around the number of layoffs that have occurred is that layoffs are traumatic, they're embarrassing. People are dealing with a real trauma, and most people on this call are. So do not underestimate how helpful it can be to you and your search to be in community with folks who are going through the same thing. You will learn how they're approaching their search. You will learn how they're doing and tips for just navigating this moment that those of us on this panel can't speak to because we're not going through a federal layoff right now. So make sure that you're creating space to be with your colleagues, to be checking in with them, to be learning from them in this moment. It's another form of networking that is very important and often gets forgotten.
Thanks, Caitlin. I think that's a really important point. And, you know, let's put it in the column of self-care for all of you is making sure you're taking care of yourself and making sure you're talking to people who are going through a similar experience because you know, you're not alone. And as much as this last few months has been traumatic, I think that there is I hope there's not shame in it because the whole world knows what's happening. The whole country knows what's happening, and as you know, we tell people all the time, this isn't about you at all, and it's hard to internalize that, but it's really important to remember and to find people who can help you get through this moment. So coming to the Q&A, one of the really practical questions that I think is a good one, and for our panelists, any of you can jump in on these. One question from one of our viewers is, what is the recommended length when revising your resume to transition from government? Because as we all know, government resumes tend to be pretty long, and we don't want to bore people. So how do you recommend shortening it, you know, to like what's a good number of pages for folks to aim for jobs outside the government?
So for political jobs, we recommend that folks try to have a one-page version of your resume. I know that's very short. It can go to 2 pages if you're much more advanced in your career. And we know that we've got a lot of folks on this call right now who are assistant secretaries, deputy assistant secretaries. So you can think about 2 if you're really decades into your career. But just try to remember that a hiring manager is going to be looking at your resume for a minute tops. You want it to be legible, readable in a size font that you don't need a magnifying glass. You really want it to pop on that first page as to why someone should be interested in talking to you. You're not going to tell them absolutely everything in the resume. The resume is just your foot in the door. And so that's really, I think, how you should think about it.
Thanks, Lauren. Tom or Caitlin, do you agree with that, or do you, yeah, 1 or 2, ideally 1 to 2?
Yep. And I can't remember who made it the acronym point, like spell it out. Like no one knows it. Just assume no one knows what the acronyms are. So spell it out, but brevity is key. Another thing a mentor gave me advice in the past is like, you want to say something for the interview. Like, so you can be brief in your bullets. You don't have to drill down to like everything you ever did. Just think of it like you're going to give them a broad description of what you did, but then in an interview, you're going to go into details to let them know why you're qualified for that job.
Thanks.
And I've heard before that the average resume is viewed for like 3 to 5 seconds. So just keep that in mind to all of the points just made. You have literal seconds to get on the radar of the person who's looking at your resume. So less is always more.
What about for cover letters?
I think short cover letters are good and specific cover letters are good. I think it's a ding if you include a cover letter that is entirely generic and doesn't speak to the job that you're applying for at all. So definitely keep that in mind. Update it to be specific to the role that you are submitting the cover letter for, even if you have a template that you're using and updating each time. And make sure that you don't leave any language from another job that you applied to in the cover letter.
Yeah.
I think the cover letter is a great chance to spell out why you're particularly interested in this job. Someone mentioned earlier in the panel that like you have to show genuine enthusiasm about the job you're applying for. So even if you might be like really sad that you're leaving or that you were fired from your last job and you don't actually want a new job, in order to get hired, you have to make clear that this is something you'd be excited to do, and a really brief explication of why a role is exciting to you and tied to your past skills is a great thing to do in the cover letter.
All right. So, speaking of being laid off, how do we talk about that in a cover letter, in an interview? You know, this is one of the questions that came in. How do you address this with recruiters and hiring managers?
So I actually think this is a lot easier right now because of the context of what's going on. It's not, I think most people on this call, to the extent they've been laid off, it's a result of federal government layoffs. I think you can just be plain and clear, like I lost my job as part of the federal government downsizing in the Trump administration. And it'll be pretty clear to most folks that that was not performance based. Where it tends to be more complicated is if you're coming out of like, let's say, a corporate layoff type situation where maybe they're downsizing, but they're saying it's for performance reasons. Like here, I would just be super clear about what the reasoning was. Or if you worked for a federal contractor that lost government funds, same thing. Just being upfront about it. And then again, also emphasizing that you see this as an opportunity to take those skills and apply it elsewhere.
Other thoughts on that?
Just the other thing is just you never know the politics of the person reading your resume or cover letter. And as raw as this moment is for all of you, I just think you need to take the emotion out of it and just like to Lauren's point, like factually state that this was a downsizing of the government, and that you look forward to working in the organization. And don't let that get in the way of anyone saying no to you just because they perceive that you're leaning on one way or the other. The other thing is there could be an assumption of your politics or of your leanings based off of where you're coming from, and don't let that perception be that reality. Talk about factually based of why you're qualified for a certain position based off your skill sets.
That's really important advice. Thanks, Tom, on that. That's a really good flag. Caitlin, anything to add or on that? All right. Well, before I turn it over back over to Aziz, I just want to let you know that we will, and he'll mention this probably, but there will be an email coming around, and we're going to put a bunch of resources in there for you all, including, of course, Civic Match, Arena, and Tom Manatos jobs, but also some other important links for you to be looking at. We just want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here, and thank Lauren, Tom, and Caitlin for agreeing to share their expertise. And Aziz, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap us up.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I just briefly am going to share a bunch of resources that we have for folks. We're going to drop these all in the chat so that you are able to click them easily. You'll also be receiving an email to the email that you signed up with to access this link as well. So you'll have this in a bunch of places, but I just wanted to give a tremendous, massive thank you to Julie for really moderating a incredibly productive and thoughtful discussion, and a huge thank you to Lauren, Tom, and Caitlin for all of the incredibly insightful things that that you have to say. So thank you everyone for coming. You will receive all these links in your email. Feel free also to copy them out of the chat now. I know that they're being posted there as we speak. And thank you again. That's all I have.
Thanks, Aziz.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.